He chose passion over promises and lost both. The price of temptation, everything, including himself. David never believed in love at first sight. He thought it was something people made up for movies and romance novels. But that night at the charity event changed everything he thought he knew about himself. He'd been with Rebecca for almost 6 years. They met in college, fell into a comfortable rhythm, and got engaged 2 years ago. Everyone said they were perfect together. Their parents were friends. They had the same circle. Life was planned out, predictable, safe. Rebecca was beautiful, successful, and kind. On paper, David had everything a man could want. The hotel ballroom was packed that evening. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft golden light across the crowd. Rebecca had organized this fundraiser for months, and she was in her element, moving from group to group with that confident smile David knew so well. He stood by the bar, nursing a glass of wine, watching her work the room. She was good at this. Better than him. That's when he saw her. The woman walked in alone, and somehow, despite the hundreds of people in that room, David's eyes found her immediately. She wore a dark green dress that moved like water when she walked. Her hair was pulled back simply, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that didn't demand attention but somehow commanded it anyway. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She just was. David looked away quickly, feeling foolish. He took a sip of his wine and tried to focus on the conversation happening near him. But his eyes kept drifting back. Who was she? Why was she alone? He'd never seen her at these events before, and he'd been to plenty. A colleague from work appeared beside him. David, good to see you here. Listen, I want you to meet someone. She's considering some pieces for her gallery and might need financial advice. Before David could respond, his colleague was leading him across the room, straight toward her. Up close, she was even more striking. Not in an obvious way, but in a way that made it hard to look anywhere else. Her eyes were warm and intelligent, and when she smiled, it felt genuine. This is Natalia, his colleague said. She runs the Rivera Gallery downtown. Natalia, this is David. He's one of the best investment advisors in the city. They shook hands. Her grip was firm, confident. Nice to meet you, David. You too. His voice came out steadier than he felt. His colleague excused himself, promising to catch up later. And suddenly David was standing there with this woman who had somehow knocked his world slightly off balance in the space of 30 seconds. So, Natalia said, glancing around the crowded room, are these events always this intense, or is tonight special? David laughed. Pretty much always. Lots of money, lots of small talk, lots of people trying to be seen. And which category do you fall into? She asked, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Honestly, I'm usually the guy hiding by the bar counting down until I can leave. She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. Well, at least you're honest about it. They started talking, and the conversation flowed in a way that surprised David. She wasn't like the people he usually met at these events. She spoke about art with genuine passion, about how a single painting could tell 1,000 stories, about why she left her corporate job to open a gallery even though everyone thought she was crazy. My ex-husband definitely thought I was crazy, she said with a slight laugh that held a hint of sadness. He wanted the safe life, the predictable path. I wanted to feel alive. David felt something shift in his chest at those words. When was the last time he'd felt truly alive? What about you? Natalia asked. Do you love what you do? It was such a simple question, but David found himself hesitating. Did he love his job? He was good at it. It paid well. It impressed people, but love? I'm good at it, he said carefully. That's not what I asked. Her directness caught him off guard. Most people accepted surface answers. She didn't. No, he admitted. I don't love it. I don't hate it either. It's just what I do. Natalia nodded slowly, understanding in her expression. That's honest. Most people won't even admit that much to themselves. They talked for over an hour. About dreams they'd given up on. About the difference between security and happiness, about whether it was possible to have both. The noise of the gala faded into background music. David forgot about the time, forgot about where he was, forgot about everything except the woman standing in front of him. She told him about her divorce, how she'd spent years trying to be the person her husband wanted instead of being herself, how she woke up one day and didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. David found himself sharing things he'd never said out loud, doubts about his engagement, fears about settling, questions about whether he was living his life or just going through the motions. I proposed because it felt like the next logical step. He heard himself say. We'd been together long enough. Everyone expected it. Her parents expected it. My parents expected it. So I did it. But did you want to do it? Natalia asked softly. David opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. The truth was complicated. He loved Rebecca. But was he in love with her? Or was he just comfortable, safe, going through the expected motions of a life he'd never really chosen? I don't know, he whispered. Natalia reached out and touched his arm gently. Just a brief touch, nothing inappropriate, but David felt it like electricity. Then maybe you need to figure that out before you walk down that aisle. Someone called Natalia's name from across the room. She glanced over, then back at David. I should go. It was really nice talking to you. Wait, David said, surprising himself. Maybe we could have coffee sometime. I'd like to hear more about your gallery. Even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. He didn't care about the gallery. He just didn't want this conversation to end. He didn't want this feeling to end. Natalia studied his face for a moment, and he wondered if she could see right through him. Then she smiled, a little sad, a little knowing. Maybe that's not a good idea, David. She handed him her business card anyway. Their fingers brushed as he took it. Then she walked away, disappearing into the crowd like she'd never been there at all. David stood there, card in hand, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. There you are. Rebecca appeared at his elbow, slightly flushed from her rounds. I've been looking everywhere for you. Come on, we need to say hello to the Johnsons. They donated a huge amount tonight. David slipped the card into his pocket and followed his fiancée into the crowd. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. He kept seeing Natalia's smile, hearing her question echo in his head. Did you want to do it? On the drive home, Rebecca talked excitedly about the fundraiser's success, about how much money they'd raised, about the connections she'd made. David made appropriate sounds at appropriate times, but he wasn't really listening. You seem distracted, Rebecca said finally. Are you okay? Just tired, David lied. Long week. She reached over and squeezed his hand. I know, we've both been so busy. Maybe we should plan a weekend away soon. Just the two of us. Yeah, David said. That sounds good. But even as he said it, his hand was in his pocket, fingers touching the edge of Natalia's business card. And he knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified him, that he was going to call her. That night, lying in bed beside Rebecca as she slept peacefully, David stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what had happened. One conversation. That's all it was. One conversation with a stranger at a party. It shouldn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything, but it felt like everything had changed. The business card sat on David's desk for 3 days. He'd taken it out of his pocket that first night and tucked it into his wallet. Then he moved it to his desk drawer, then to the corner of his desk where he could see it. He must have picked it up 100 times, turning it over in his fingers, reading the simple text. Natalia Rivera. Rivera Gallery. A phone number. An email address. He told himself he was being ridiculous. It was just networking. Business people exchange cards all the time. There was nothing wrong with reaching out to discuss potential investments. The gallery might need financial planning services. This was professional, completely professional. On the 4th day, he texted her. Hi, Natalia, this is David from the charity event. Would love to grab coffee and hear more about your gallery if you're available. He stared at the message for 5 full minutes before hitting send. His heart pounded like he was doing something dangerous, which was silly. It was just coffee. Just business, she replied 2 hours later. Sure, Thursday at 10? There's a cafe near my gallery. Thursday morning, David told his assistant he had an outside meeting. He told Rebecca he had a breakfast client. Small lies. Harmless lies. Except they didn't feel harmless. They felt like the beginning of something he couldn't take back. The cafe was small and cozy, with exposed brick walls and the rich smell of fresh coffee. Natalia was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea in front of her. She looked different in daylight, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, more relaxed, more real. Thanks for meeting me, David said, sliding into the seat across from her. Of course, though I have to admit I'm curious what you really want to talk about. David felt his face get warm. What do you mean? Come on, David. Her smile was gentle but knowing. You don't want to talk about gallery finances. You wanted to see me again. The directness should have bothered him. Instead, it was refreshing. No games. No pretending. You're right, he admitted. I did want to see you again. I can't stop thinking about our conversation the other night. Neither can I, Natalia said quietly. They talked for 2 hours. The coffee turned cold in David's cup as they discussed everything and nothing. She told him about her art, about finding pieces that spoke to her soul, about the joy of connecting artists with people who truly appreciated their work. He found himself opening up about his own abandoned dreams, how he'd wanted to be a teacher once, working with kids, making a difference. But everyone said it wasn't practical, wasn't smart financially. When did you stop doing what you wanted? Natalia asked. I don't know. Gradually, I guess. Little choices that seemed sensible at the time. Stay in the job that pays well even though it bores you. Propose to the woman everyone expects you to marry even though something feels off. Buy the house in the right neighborhood. Plan the wedding at the right venue. It's like I'm following a script I never agreed to write. So stop following it. It's not that simple, isn't it? Natalia leaned forward, her eyes intense. David, I spent 7 years of my life being someone I wasn't. Wearing the right clothes, saying the right things, hosting the right dinners. I was so busy being what my husband wanted that I forgot who I was. And you know what? He still left. Because you can't fake that kind of thing forever. People feel it when you're not really there. Does Rebecca feel it? David asked quietly. I don't know Rebecca, but do you think she does? David thought about the past few months. How Rebecca had suggested couples therapy. How she'd asked if something was wrong. How she looked at him sometimes with confusion in her eyes, like she was trying to figure out what had changed. Maybe, he whispered. They started meeting regularly after that. Always coffee, always public places, always with the excuse of discussing gallery business or financial planning. David told himself they were just friends. Friends could have coffee. Friends could talk. There was nothing wrong with having a friend, but he knew he was lying to himself. He thought about Natalia constantly. During meetings at work, he'd catch his mind wandering to something she'd said. Driving home, he'd replay their conversations. At night, lying next to Rebecca, he'd wonder what Natalia was doing, if she was thinking about him too. The texts started innocently enough. Thanks for coffee today. That article you mentioned was really interesting. Hope you're having a good day. But they grew more frequent, more personal. Good morning messages. Good night messages. Random thoughts throughout the day that he wanted to share with her instead of with his fiancée. Rebecca noticed something was different. You're on your phone a lot lately, she said one evening as they sat on the couch together. Just work stuff, David replied, quickly closing his messages. On a Sunday night? You know how it is. Clients need things at random times. Rebecca studied him for a long moment, and David felt his stomach twist with guilt. She knew something was off. She just didn't know what. We haven't really talked about the wedding lately, Rebecca said. My mom keeps asking about final numbers. We need to confirm the venue deposit. Right, yeah, we should talk about that. When? Soon, I've just been really busy with work. Another lie. They were piling up now, getting harder to keep track of. David excused himself and went to the bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. Who was this person? When did he become someone who lied so easily? His phone buzzed. A text from Natalia. You okay? You seem distant today, he typed back. Just dealing with some stuff at home. Want to talk about it? Not over text. Maybe tomorrow? Always. That simple word made his heart beat faster. Always, like a promise. Like she'd be there whenever he needed her. Rebecca had said that word too once. During their engagement. I'll always be here for you. But somewhere along the way, always had turned into habit, into routine, into two people living parallel lives in the same house. A month passed, then another. David's life became two separate worlds. There was his life with Rebecca, filled with wedding planning and family dinners and conversations about mortgages and retirement plans. Safe, predictable, slowly suffocating him. And there was his life with Natalia. Coffee turning into lunch. Lunch turning into early dinners. Long walks through the city where they'd talk for hours. A world where he felt seen, understood, alive. I'm falling for you, Natalia said one evening as they stood outside her gallery after closing. I know I shouldn't. I know you're engaged. But I can't help it. David's breath caught. Natalia, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. What we have, whatever this is, it's not just friendship for me anymore. It's not just friendship for me either, David admitted. They stood there in the fading light, close enough to touch but not touching. The tension between them was unbearable. David knew he should leave, should go home to Rebecca, should end this before it went any further. Instead, he took Natalia's hand. That's all it was, just holding hands. But it felt like crossing a line he could never uncross. It felt like choosing, and in that moment, David realized he'd already chosen. He'd chosen the moment he sent that first text. Maybe even before that. Maybe he'd chosen the moment their eyes met across that crowded ballroom. I need to figure some things out, David said quietly. My engagement, my life. It's not fair to anyone if I keep living like this. Take your time, Natalia said. I'm not going anywhere. But David knew that taking time was just another form of lying, because the truth was already crystal clear. He didn't want the life he'd built with Rebecca. He wanted something else, someone else. And every day he delayed making that choice was another day of dishonesty. That night he came home late. Rebecca was already in bed reading. Where were you? She asked, not looking up from her book. Dinner meeting ran long. On a Wednesday. Important client. Rebecca finally looked at him, and there was something in her eyes David had never seen before. Not anger, something sadder. Resignation, maybe. David, are you having an affair? The question hung in the air between them. David's mind raced. He could deny it. Technically, he hadn't done anything physical with Natalia beyond holding hands. But he knew that wasn't what mattered. He'd been emotionally unfaithful for months. No, he said. The lie tasted bitter. Rebecca nodded slowly. Then why does it feel like you're somewhere else? Even when you're standing right here? I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. She set her book down. I know you, David, or at least I thought I did. But lately it's like you're a stranger. You're distant, distracted, you barely touch me anymore. You look at your phone and smile at things you won't share with me. So either you're having an affair or you've just stopped loving me. Either way, I think I deserve the truth. David sat down on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. This was the moment. He could come clean. End this properly. Be honest, for the first time in months. I'm not having an affair, he said again. I'm just stressed about work. And maybe, yeah, I've been distant. I'm sorry. We should probably talk to someone. A counselor, maybe. Even as he suggested it, he knew it was wrong. You don't go to couples therapy while you're falling in love with someone else. But he wasn't ready. Wasn't brave enough yet to blow up his entire life. Rebecca looked at him for a long moment, and David wondered if she'd push harder. If she'd demand the truth. Part of him hoped she would, because then he wouldn't have to be the first time David kissed Natalia, it was raining. They'd spent the evening at a small exhibition she'd curated at her gallery. Local artists, intimate pieces, the kind of event where wine flowed freely and conversations felt meaningful. David had told Rebecca he had a late work dinner. Another lie. They were piling up so high now he was starting to lose track of which story he'd told to whom. The exhibition ended around 10. Natalia asked if David could help carry some supplies back to her apartment, which was just a few blocks away. He should have said no, should have made an excuse, should have gone home. But he said yes. Of course he said yes. The rain started as they were loading boxes into his car. Not a gentle drizzle, but a sudden downpour that soaked them in seconds. They ran, laughing. Boxes held over their heads, shoes splashing through puddles. By the time they reached her building, they were completely drenched. Natalia's apartment was on the 3rd floor, a small space filled with art and books in the kind of warm, lived-in feeling that comes from someone who's truly comfortable in their own skin. She handed David a towel and one of her oversized sweaters. It might be a bit tight, she said with a grin, but it's better than sitting around in wet clothes. David changed in the bathroom, catching his reflection in the mirror. His heart was pounding. This was dangerous. He knew it was dangerous. Being alone with her in her space, wearing her clothes. Every rational thought in his head screamed at him to leave. But when he walked back into the living room and saw Natalia curled up on the couch, 2 glasses of wine already poured, her hair still damp and falling around her face, looking so beautiful and real, and here, all those rational thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. Come sit, she said, patting the cushion beside her. He sat, close, too close. Their knees touched. They talked about the exhibition, about the artists, about which pieces had sold and which hadn't. But the real conversation was happening in the silence between words, in the way they kept finding excuses to touch each other's hands, in the way the space between them seemed to shrink with every passing minute. "David," Natalia said finally, setting down her wine glass, "we need to talk about what's happening here. I know, this has to stop. Or you have to make a choice. I can't keep being the person you run to when your real life gets hard." "You're not just an escape," David said. "Then what am I?" He looked at her, this woman who'd somehow become the center of his world in just a few short months. "You're the first real thing I've felt in years." Natalia's eyes filled with tears. "That's not fair to Rebecca. I know, and it's not fair to me. I'm not asking you to leave her. I never asked for that, but I can't do this halfway thing anymore. It's killing me. What do you want me to do? I want you to be honest, with her. With yourself, with me. Stop living in this gray area where you get to have both worlds without making any real choices." David reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. "I know I need to end things with Rebecca. I've known it for a while. I'm just scared." "Of what?" "Of hurting her. Of disappointing everyone. Of admitting I've been lying for months. Of looking like the bad guy." He paused. "Of losing you." "You're not going to lose me," Natalia whispered. "But you're already losing yourself." She was right. He could feel it. The way he was splitting into pieces, trying to be one person at home and another person here. Neither version felt complete. Neither version felt honest. They sat in silence for a moment, hands intertwined. The rain drummed against the windows. Somewhere in the building, music played softly. It felt like the whole world had shrunk down to just this room, just this moment. "Stay tonight," Natalia said quietly. "Just to sleep. I just want to fall asleep next to someone who actually wants to be here." David should have said no, should have recognized this as the final line that, once crossed, would change everything. But he was so tired of doing what he should do. So tired of being the person everyone else expected him to be. "Okay," he whispered. Natalia stood and held out her hand. David took it. She led him to her bedroom, small and cozy, with a bed covered in soft blankets and pillows. They lay down together, still in their clothes, not doing anything more than holding each other. But the intimacy of it was overwhelming. More than kissing. More than anything physical. Just lying there, breathing in sync, feeling safe and seen and chosen. "David," Natalia whispered into the darkness. "Yeah? Don't let this be just another thing you regret." But even as she said it, David felt the weight of what he was doing. Rebecca was at home right now, probably worried, checking her phone, wondering where he was. He should text her. Should make up another excuse, but he couldn't bring himself to move, to shatter this moment with more lies. Instead, he pulled Natalia closer and let himself feel what he'd been fighting for months. Let himself admit that he'd fallen completely, helplessly in love with her, and that there was no going back from this. He woke up at 5 in the morning in a panic. Natalia was still asleep beside him, peaceful and beautiful in the early light filtering through the curtains. David carefully extracted himself from the bed, found his dried clothes, and got dressed as quietly as possible. He should wake her. Should say goodbye properly, but he couldn't face it. Couldn't face the reality of what had happened. So he left a note on her kitchen counter. "Had to go. We'll talk later." The drive home felt like driving toward his own execution. His phone had 3 missed calls from Rebecca and several worried texts. "Where are you? Are you okay? Please call me. I'm getting worried." He pulled into the driveway at 6 in the morning. Rebecca's car was there. The house was dark except for one light in the living room. David sat in his car for a full 5 minutes trying to figure out what to say, how to explain where he'd been. But there was no good explanation, not one that wasn't a lie. He walked in to find Rebecca sitting on the couch, still in her pajamas, eyes red from crying. "Where were you?" Her voice was quiet, exhausted. "I'm sorry. I should have called. The dinner ran really late and then I had some drinks and I didn't want to drive, so I crashed at Kevin's place." Another lie. So smooth now. So practiced. Rebecca stood up, and David saw something in her face that made his stomach drop. She wasn't sad anymore. She was certain. "Kevin called here at midnight looking for you. Said he needed to talk to you about a project." David felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He'd forgotten Kevin had Rebecca's number too. Forgotten that lies have a way of unraveling when you're not careful. "Rebecca, don't." She held up her hand. Just don't. I can't listen to another lie. I can't watch you scramble to explain this one away. I'm done. It's not what you think. Then what is it, David? Because from where I'm standing, you've been lying to me for months. You disappear for hours. You're always on your phone. You barely look at me anymore. And now you didn't come home all night. So either tell me the truth right now or we're finished. This was it. The moment of choice. David could still lie, could make up another story, could probably talk his way out of this if he really tried. Rebecca wanted to believe him. He could see it in her eyes, that desperate hope that maybe this was all a misunderstanding, but he was so tired of lying. Tired of being two different people. Tired of hurting someone who'd never done anything wrong except love him. There's someone else, he said quietly. I didn't plan it. It just happened. And I know that's not an excuse. I know I should have told you sooner. I know I should have ended things with you before any of this started. I'm sorry. Rebecca's face crumpled. Who is she? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. I deserve to know who you're throwing away 6 years for. Her name is Natalia. She runs an art gallery. We met at the fundraiser. The fundraiser? That was months ago. You've been lying to me for months? Rebecca's voice rose, anger finally breaking through the hurt. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did happen. You made choices, David. Every time you texted her, every time you met her for coffee or lunch or whatever the hell else you've been doing, you chose her over me, over us, over the life we were building together. She was right. Every word was true, and David had no defense, no excuse that would make any of this okay. I'm sorry, he said again, knowing how pathetically inadequate those words were. Rebecca walked past him toward their bedroom. I want you out of here tonight. Pack your things and go. Go be with her if that's what you want. But you don't get to stay here. You don't get to have both. Rebecca, can we please talk about this? She spun around and the look on her face made David step back. Talk about what? About how you've been cheating on me? About how everything we had was a lie? About how I've been planning our wedding while you've been falling in love with someone else? There's nothing to talk about. It's over. David wanted to argue, to explain, to somehow make this hurt less, but he'd done enough damage. The kindest thing he could do now was leave. He packed a bag while Rebecca sat in the living room, silent tears streaming down her face. Every item he put in the suitcase felt like another piece of their life together breaking apart. The book she'd given him last Christmas. The watch from their anniversary. The photo from their trip to Italy 3 years ago when they'd still been happy. Still been in love, still been real. When he was done, he found Rebecca exactly where he'd left her, staring at nothing. I really am sorry. David moved in with Natalia 2 weeks after leaving Rebecca. It happened quickly, maybe too quickly, but his hotel room felt like a prison and Natalia's apartment felt like home. Or what he thought home should feel like. The first few days were like a dream. They could finally be together openly, without sneaking around or checking their phones nervously or making up excuses. They cooked dinner together, fell asleep tangled up in each other, woke up and had coffee while reading the news. All the normal couple things he'd never properly appreciated with Rebecca, because he'd been taking them for granted. But reality has a way of creeping in. Your phone's ringing again, Natalia said one morning, nodding toward his cell buzzing on the counter. David glanced at the screen. Rebecca's mom. The 5th call this week. He'd been ignoring them all, along with calls from his own parents, from mutual friends, from Rebecca's sister. Everyone wanted answers, wanted to understand, wanted to tell him what a terrible person he was. I'll call them back later, he said, silencing the phone. You can't avoid them forever. I can try. Natalia gave him a look, something between understanding and frustration. David, you need to deal with this. With all of it. You can't just pretend your old life didn't exist, I know. I just need time. But time didn't make it easier. Time just made the avoidance more obvious. Work was complicated, too. Word had spread fast about the broken engagement. Kevin, who'd accidentally exposed David's lie, apologized profusely, but the damage was done. Colleagues who'd been friendly now gave him cold shoulders in the hallway. His boss called him in for a chat about maintaining professional standards. Rebecca worked in the same industry, knew many of the same people, and David could feel the judgment everywhere he went. Maybe I should look for a new job, he mentioned to Natalia one evening. Why? Everyone knows what happened. They all think I'm the bad guy. You kind of are the bad guy, though, Natalia said gently. I mean, I love you, but you have to own what you did. You can't run from it. She was right. She was often right. But hearing it out loud still stung. The first real fight happened 3 weeks in. David had been quiet all evening, distracted and distant. Natalia finally put down her book and turned to him. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. You're not fine. You've been weird all day. Talk to me. I saw Rebecca today, David admitted, at the coffee shop near the office. She was with someone. They were laughing. Natalia was quiet for a moment. And that bothered you? I don't know. Maybe. She looked happy. Happier than she'd been with me in months. Isn't that a good thing? I guess. It just feels weird. Like maybe I was the problem all along. Like she's better off without me. She probably is better off without you, Natalia said, and there was an edge to her voice now. You weren't in love with her. You wanted something else. That's why we're here. That's what you chose, and I know that. Do you? Because right now it kind of feels like you're having regrets. I'm not having regrets about you. I'm just processing everything. Well, process faster, Natalia snapped. Because I can't be with someone who's still emotionally attached to his ex. I already did the whole competing with a ghost thing in my marriage. I'm not doing it again. They didn't talk for the rest of the night. David slept on the couch, feeling the first real crack in their perfect bubble. The next day, he tried to reach out to Rebecca. Sent her a long email apologizing again. Trying to explain, hoping maybe they could eventually be friends. She didn't respond. Instead, his phone rang an hour later. Rebecca's best friend. Don't contact her again, the friend said, her voice ice cold. You destroyed her, David. She cried for 2 weeks straight. She had to cancel a wedding, explain to everyone what happened, deal with the humiliation of everyone knowing her fiancé was cheating on her. And now you want to be friends? You want forgiveness? You don't get that. You don't get to make yourself feel better by getting her blessing. Leave her alone. The call ended. David sat in his car in the parking lot of his office, feeling like the worst person in the world. When he got home that evening, Natalia was waiting with dinner and an apology. I'm sorry about last night. I overreacted. This is hard for both of us. You weren't wrong, though, David said. I am still processing, and maybe that's not fair to you. They talked it through, made up, went to bed holding each other. But something had shifted. The fairy tale was developing cracks. As weeks turned into months, the cracks grew wider. David's parents finally confronted him over dinner. His mother cried. His father barely spoke. Rebecca's family had been close friends with his family for years. Now that friendship was destroyed too. How could you do this? His mother asked. Rebecca was perfect for you. We all loved her. And you threw it away for what? Some woman you barely know? I know, Natalia, David defended. We're in love. Love? His father finally spoke. You think sneaking around and lying is love? You think destroying someone who trusted you is love? That's not love, son. That's selfishness. David left his parents' house feeling angry and defensive, but underneath he wondered if they were right. Things with Natalia became more complicated too. Without the thrill of secret meetings and forbidden romance, they had to face the reality of just being a regular couple. And it turned out they disagreed on a lot. She wanted to travel, take risks, live spontaneously. He was worried about money, about rebuilding his savings after paying Rebecca for his share of everything they'd bought together. She was social, always wanting to go out, meet people, attend events. He felt judged everywhere he went and wanted to stay home. She was an optimist who believed everything would work out. He was anxious about the future, about whether he'd made the right choice, about whether this was all worth it. You're not the person I fell in love with, Natalia said one night after another argument about nothing and everything. What do you mean? That guy at the gala? The one who seemed trapped in his life and desperate to break free? He was exciting. He was interesting. But this version of you? You're just guilty and sad and worried all the time. It's exhausting. I'm dealing with consequences, David shot back. Real consequences of real choices. This isn't a romantic fantasy anymore. This is actual life. I know it's actual life. I left my marriage. I know what it's like to blow up your world for something better. But I didn't spend every day mourning what I left behind. I celebrated finally being free. Maybe you didn't care about your ex-husband as much as I cared about Rebecca. The words hung in the air like poison. Natalia's face went pale. Get out, she said quietly. Natalia, I didn't mean, get out. Now. David spent that night back at a hotel. He tried to call Natalia, but she wouldn't answer. He tried to text, but she didn't respond. He lay awake wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The next morning, she finally texted. We need to talk. They met at a park, neutral territory. Natalia looked tired, like she hadn't slept either. I can't do this anymore, she said. David's heart sank. Can't do what? This us, I thought we wanted the same thing. I thought we were both choosing freedom and authenticity and taking a risk on something real. But you're not choosing anything. You're just running away. And I don't want to be someone's escape plan. I want to be someone's actual choice, and you are my choice, am I? Because it feels like you chose me by default when your old life became uncomfortable, not because you actually love me and want to build something with me. That's not true, isn't it? Be honest, David, really honest. If you hadn't met me, would you still have left Rebecca? Or would you still be planning that wedding? Going through the motions, living that safe, comfortable life you claimed to hate? David opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat, because she was right. He wouldn't have left Rebecca if it wasn't for Natalia. He'd have kept going, kept pretending, kept living that scripted life he'd never really chosen. That's what I thought, Natalia said softly. You didn't leave her for me. You left her because I gave you an excuse to run. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe we both need to figure out who we are without using each other as reasons to make big life choices. I need to know I can be happy alone. And you need to figure out what you actually want instead of just reacting to what you don't want. Are you breaking up with me? I think we both know this isn't working. We fell in love with an idea of each other, not the real thing. The real thing is messy and complicated and doesn't live up to the fantasy. David felt tears burning in his eyes. I do love you. I love you too. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes timing matters. Sometimes people aren't ready. And I don't think you were ready to leave your old life. I think you were pushed out of it before you'd actually decided to go. They sat in silence, both crying, both knowing she was right. I'm sorry, David finally said, for everything. For using you as an escape. For not being the person you needed me to be. I'm sorry too. I knew you were engaged. I should have walked away at that gala. But I didn't. I wanted to believe we were meant to be, that love conquers all, that the universe brought us together. But that's just a story we tell ourselves to justify bad choices. They hugged goodbye, holding each other for a long time, mourning what could have been but never really was. David found himself alone again. No Rebecca. No Natalia. No relationship. No wedding. No clear future. Just himself and the Ethan. 6 months after his breakup with Natalia, David sat in a therapist's office for the first time in his life. He'd resisted the idea for weeks, telling himself he didn't need help, that he could figure things out on his own. But the truth was he was stuck. Stuck in regret, stuck in confusion, stuck in a pattern he couldn't seem to break. Tell me why you're here, Dr. Patterson said. She was in her 50s, kind eyes behind glasses, the type of person who looked like she'd heard every story and wouldn't judge any of them. I messed up my life, David said simply. I was engaged. I cheated. Well, emotionally cheated. Then physically. Then I left my fiancé for the other woman. Then that relationship fell apart too. Now I'm alone and I have no idea who I am or what I want. That's a lot, Dr. Patterson said. Let's start at the beginning. Were you happy in your engagement? Over the next hour, David talked more honestly than he'd talked to anyone in months. About how he'd felt trapped. About how Rebecca was perfect on paper but something was missing. About how he met Natalia and suddenly felt alive for the first time in years. About how he'd lied and snuck around and justified it to himself. About how it all fell apart when the fantasy hit reality. Here's what I'm hearing, Dr. Patterson said when he finished. You weren't happy in your relationship, but instead of addressing that directly, you looked for an exit. Natalia wasn't the problem or the solution. She was the escape hatch. That's what she said too. She was right. David, when we're unhappy with ourselves, we tend to think the problem is external. The wrong job, the wrong partner, the wrong life. So we blow it all up hoping the next thing will be better. But if we don't fix what's broken inside, we just carry those same problems into the next situation. So what was broken inside me? That's what we're here to figure out. The therapy sessions became a regular thing. Every week, David sat in that office and unpacked his life. He talked about his childhood, about parents who had high expectations and clear ideas about success, about how he'd spent his whole life trying to meet those expectations, business school instead of teaching, investment banking instead of nonprofit work, proposing to Rebecca because everyone thought they were perfect together. "I think I've been living someone else's life," David admitted during one session, "like I've been following a script that was written before I was born. Good grades, good college, good job, good wife, good house. All the boxes checked. And how did that feel? Safe, boring, suffocating. So when Natalia came along, what did she represent? Freedom, I guess. She'd left her marriage to follow her dreams. She ran an art gallery doing work she loved even though it didn't pay much. She seemed fearless, like she was actually living instead of just going through motions. You wanted what she had? Yeah. But David, you can't get that from another person. Freedom, passion, authentic living, those come from inside. Natalia couldn't give them to you. Neither could Rebecca. Only you can choose to live authentically. The words hit hard. David spent the next several days thinking about them. All his life he'd been waiting for external things to make him happy. The right relationship, the right job, the right circumstances. But happiness had always been somewhere else, just out of reach. He started making small changes. He cut back his hours at work, stopped caring so much about what colleagues thought. He started volunteering at a youth center, helping kids with homework, remembering why he'd wanted to be a teacher once. It didn't pay anything, but it felt meaningful in a way his banking work never had. He reached out to his parents, had honest conversations about expectations and disappointments. They didn't all land well. His father still thought he'd made a huge mistake. But at least they were talking. He stopped checking Natalia's social media, stopped wondering what she was doing, who she was with, whether she ever thought about him. He sent her a final message. "Thank you for teaching me what passion feels like, even if we weren't right for each other." "I hope you're happy," she responded simply. "You too." One evening, about 8 months into therapy, David ran into Rebecca again. This time at a bookstore. She was browsing the fiction section alone. "Rebecca," he said before he could chicken out. She looked up, surprised. "David, hi. Hi, how are you?" "I'm good. Really good, actually." And she looked it, relaxed, content, no longer carrying that hurt he'd seen in her eyes before. "I'm glad. I saw you at the wedding. You seemed happy with that guy. Carter. Yeah, we've been together about 4 months now. It's nice, easy, honest." The last word had a slight edge to it, but not mean, just factual. "That's great, really." They stood awkwardly for a moment. Then Rebecca said something unexpected. "Do you want to get coffee?" "Just coffee. I think maybe we need to actually talk." David was surprised, but he agreed. They went to a cafe across the street, ordered, and sat down in a quiet corner. "I've been in therapy," David said, "trying to figure out why I did what I did, why I handled everything so badly." "Good, you needed that." "I did, and I've realized a lot of things. Mainly that I was unhappy with myself, not with you. You were amazing, Rebecca. You deserved someone who was all in, and I wasn't. I don't think I was even half in by the end." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I've been in therapy too, and I've realized I knew something was off for months before you left. I just didn't want to see it. I kept thinking if we checked more boxes, planned the perfect wedding, bought the right house, everything would click into place. But you can't force chemistry that isn't there." "We had chemistry once," David said. "In college. We had fun in college. We had young love. But we grew into different people, and neither of us was brave enough to admit it wasn't working anymore. You just happened to be the one who blew it up first. I'm sorry I did it the way I did. The lying, the cheating. You deserved honesty. Yeah, I did. And I was so angry at you for months, hurt, humiliated, but honestly, I'm over it now. You did me a favor. I'm with someone now who actually wants to be with me, who doesn't look at me like I'm a checkbox on a life to-do list." Carter makes me laugh. He asks about my day and actually listens. He's not perfect, but he's present. That's all I really wanted. David felt a weight lift off his chest. I'm really happy for you. What about you? Are you seeing anyone? No, I'm taking time to figure myself out first. Turns out I don't really know who I am when I'm not trying to be what someone else wants. That's probably smart. For what it's worth, I hope you figure it out. I don't hate you, David. I did for a while. But now I just hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. They finished their coffee, hugged goodbye, and went their separate ways. And David realized something that had been true all along. He'd loved Rebecca. He still cared about her, but he'd never been in love with her, not in the way she deserved. And staying with her would have been its own kind of betrayal. Eventually, the resentment would have destroyed them both. As months passed, David kept working on himself. He joined a hiking group, made new friends who didn't know his history. He read books, traveled alone, learned to cook. He had bad days where he regretted everything, and good days where he felt grateful for the lessons learned the hard way. One Saturday, he was at the youth center when one of the kids asked him a question. "Mr. David, why do you come here? Don't you have more important things to do?" David thought about it. A year ago, he would have said yes. Banking was important. Making money was important. Maintaining his image was important, but now, "This is the important thing," he said. "Helping you guys is the most important thing I do all week." The kid looked skeptical, but David meant it. This was the first thing in years that felt real, felt chosen, felt like it mattered. He started dating again eventually. Casually. Nothing serious. He was upfront about his past, about the mistakes he'd made, about still being a work in progress. Some women appreciated the honesty, others ran for the hills. He didn't blame them either way. He saw Natalia one more time by accident at an art exhibit. She was with someone new, laughing at something he said. David felt a pang of something. Not quite jealousy, more like nostalgia for what could have been. She saw him too. They nodded at each other across the room. A silent acknowledgement. We happened. It didn't work. We're both okay. That night, David wrote in the journal his therapist had suggested he keep. He wrote about temptation, about how easy it is to blame external things for internal unhappiness, about how Natalia had seemed like salvation when really, he just needed to save himself, about how you can't run away from problems, you can only work through them. He wrote about Rebecca, about guilt and growth and the strange mercy of second chances. Not second chances with her, but second chances to do better, be better, choose better next time. He wrote about his parents, about learning to disappoint people whose approval he'd spent his whole life chasing. About how freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's knowing who you are and living accordingly. And finally, he wrote about himself, about the person he was becoming. Flawed, yes, still figuring things out, still making mistakes. But at least now they were his mistakes, made by someone who was finally, slowly, learning to be honest. A year and a half after that night at the gala, David sat alone in his apartment on a Friday evening. No dates, no plans. No one waiting for him or wondering where he was. And for the first time in his life, he was okay with that.